My name is April Sawyer, and I am the principal of the Homeschool Leadership Academy. Well, we chose homeschooling as a method for educating our students, particularly our student athletes or entertainers, because that's the way it's done all around the world. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with celebrities talking about their homeschool experience, or even with athletes talking about their homeschool experience. I was brought right into that with several of my students who attended the school because their parents were not comfortable with them having to go away to a sports academy. They didn't want to have to spend the extra money or to lose their child at such a young age. And so they looked into ways and they studied how other athletes did it, and that's how they discovered homeschool. And so I've ended up with a lot of athletes that are a part of the national sporting teams that are here, like in tennis and soccer and in track and field. And luckily, it's because of their parents' experience and wisdom that they end up in homeschooling. For the parent that doesn't have an opportunity to kind of study the way things are done and should be done, they don't know about this. But for example, I had a student who, after being here, she came in for tennis, and after being here, she had more time for tennis because of homeschooling, because you get to personalize the day for a student. School doesn't have to start at 8 a.m. School can start at 7 o'clock. And that means if it starts at 7 o'clock, you can then now leave at 1. And if you leave at 1, you now have an extra 2 hours to devote toward whatever your sport is. That extra 2 hours goes a long way by the end of the school year. And so after being here for a full year, she got better and was offered a scholarship at a sporting academy in the US. When she transitioned into the sporting academy, she realized that the school was set up exactly like this school, and they used the same curriculums as this school. And she didn't know that before she went there, but she realized that. And it's because this is the way it's being done around the world, because you have the opportunity to tailor a child's education. Does homeschooling work? You know, in a country like the Bahamas, where there isn't much talk openly about homeschooling, there are a lot of families that homeschool, but there's not a lot of discussion about it in the public sector. It works. What a lot of people don't know is that for the last 5 or 6 years, the people who have been winning the awards for national exams and having the highest scores have been homeschool students. So if you want to look at it from a national examination context, it works. A lot of people also don't know that internationally, the students that go into university and tend to follow their course, graduate on time, do well their first year, not go through those experiences of depression that kind of happen in those first 2 years of university, they've come out of homeschool. And so in spite of the fact that people have this very closed view of how homeschooling works, and it's only for your child isn't getting social interaction and things like that, in the grander scheme of things, it works completely opposite to what people think. The homeschool student is more social, because the homeschool student deals with adults as well as children who are different ages from them. These are the ones that are even homeschooling their home by themselves and not in a unit like ours. And because of that, they're able to speak better with adults. They're able to present a case better. And when they have to be in a university setting, or if they even have an interview as far as university is concerned, they tend to do very well. And so when you take all of these things into consideration, you're talking about not just the academic education of a child, or not just even the sports education of the child. You're talking about the character that can develop from a homeschool system. Why not choose homeschool in this context when it brings so much to the table? It allows you more time for sporting, but it also improves your character, because most homeschool curriculums have a Christian emphasis. And so there's character building that works for your interviews, whether you're being chosen for a scholarship, and it also works for your life in general.
Tell me a little bit about how you're marrying the day. You mentioned it, but how this is not exactly homeschooling because they're not school. You spoke about what the advantages of a homeschool education.
Yes, sir.
Now, how are you marrying this concept into the unit based in the sports academy?
At our sports academy, each student who is a part of the academy is expected to arrive at school at between 7 and 7:30. And from there, they already have an extra 2 hours. They complete the traditional school day from 7:30 to 12:30 because they have shorter breaks, but they have them more frequently, so they don't need the long extended half an hour. They'll have 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 30 minutes to kind of get their energy back, and they go into their offices. But also, the reason, once they start the day at 7:30 and then they have their breaks, they come upstairs for the second part of the day and they focus directly on their sport. With homeschool, the reality is this: it's not lecture style. And so what you lose in lecture style is that you have a period where there's a teacher standing in front of the room talking to a child, and the child might do about 5 to 10 minutes worth of actual work. With homeschool curriculums, once a student slides into their individual offices, which we have, the minute they slide in, they're working. So if you're gonna measure it in terms of raw output, the homeschool student in 4 hours gets the same amount done as a child in the traditional school does in 8. So it works because they don't even have to go through the full 8 hours to complete what would be required or expected of them in the long run. And it's so easy to kind of follow this or to know if it's working, because although homeschool seems so foreign to us, take for example in the US, they have distance learning schools that use programs and use settings like this that have been accredited, that are accredited, so that when our students graduate, we've been approved by the Ministry of Education, so they receive a diploma from our school, but they also receive a diploma from an international body that's been accredited. And on top of that, now when they go to school, they don't have to lose in terms of their credits and what classes they've taken, because the reality that most university-bound students face is that when they go into university, they have to do a lot of entry-level or remedial level courses, because we don't have a class that's specifically Algebra 1 or Algebra 2. If I take math at one school and Susie takes math at another school in grade 12, they're taught completely different things. And as a result of that, when we go into university, at my school, I may have gone to an Algebra 2 equivalent, and Susie in grade 12 may have only gone to Algebra 1. So now Susie, because she has to meet the standards of her university, Susie is going to have to take 2 or 3 sometimes extra math courses just to be able to work at the entry-level position. What homeschooling this way ensures for a student is that they're getting everything that they need from a system that the world can recognize, not just locally. Because the truth of the matter is, by the time we apply for university, when we receive our BGCSE results, we've already gotten our university acceptance letters. So even if they could understand what the BGCSE represents or really get a chance to take it in consideration, they can't. Because they've had to make a decision on you before they even got to see that. And so they're only making a decision based off of your courses. And your courses says grade 12 math, history. And then to top it all off, schools now, most of our children are Canada and US bound. And we use a system that the British would have a better understanding of, although the BGCSE and the IGCSEs are completely different and worlds apart. But they can at least start to understand what it's supposed to represent. But in this context and in this system, a student is taking the classes like they need. What happens with a student here is that in the 10th grade in most schools, you enroll in biology. And then you take biology until graduation. Or chemistry, but you don't take biology, chemistry, and physics. what is expected of you from universities is that to complete your sciences, especially American universities, you would have had biology, chemistry, physics, and maybe physical science for some schools. With math, the most important area, they expect you to have Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and in some cases, I'm starting to hear from universities as I prepare my children, something called Algebra 3. So when we're only taking grade 12 math, and you don't see, I've only taken biology, and I've only taken history, I don't have world geography, I don't have anthropology, I don't have any of these other courses that fill my requirements towards graduation. Essentially, it looks to an advisor on the other side as though it's taken me 3 years to complete this one topic, because it's supposed to be for 1 year. And so now students are in a distressing situation, and people wonder, why is it that we send our best and our brightest off, and it might take them 5 years as opposed to 4? There's nothing wrong with the student. It's not their fault. They're still our best and our brightest, and they're still probably the best and the brightest in the world. But it's that they're coming out of a system that is created deficits for them that they now have to fill in on the other end.
So, how can a agency like the National Sporting Academy facilitate you better? Okay, is it in assisting education to recognize these degrees, or talk a little bit about how the NSA could potentially bridge this gap that probably the traditional education isn't going to be able to do?
The NSA has a beautiful opportunity that other organizations and bodies don't have, especially with respect to education, because most parents understand sports and they're willing to hear from a sporting body as far as their children are concerned, because a lot of people are looking for scholarships, and they know that if their children do well in sports, they can get scholarships. If the NSA supported the concept of homeschooling to give parents the opportunity to understand that homeschooling is not a bad thing, homeschooling is not detrimental to my child, but it is actually useful for my child, then there will be a completely different rhetoric and discussion in the public as far as homeschooling is concerned. And you will have a lot more children, even in the traditional school system, benefiting, because access to homeschool curriculums is available to all. The money that you would spend on tutoring, you can invest in homeschool curriculum books that parents can use at home themselves. They don't even have to be there with the child per se for it to help, and you can have a student move from a C average in a subject to B average just from using a homeschool curriculum within your home. And if you have a recognized body or authority saying homeschooling works and this is good for your children, then you will see a lot more people move towards it. Right now, the type of discussion that you get from most individuals is very negative because they know nothing about homeschool. So the first things they'll say to me if I suggest or talk about homeschooling, even talk about my connection to homeschooling, their thing is, well, what about socialization? Or how do you know they learn everything that they're supposed to learn? Or how are they going to do on the national examinations? Do you focus on national examinations? And the thing is, it helps a lot with the national examinations, but we need people to understand that on an international scale, there's more than the national examinations. That's the reality. For someone to be successful in any craft, you need beyond the national examinations.